So good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me, and I wish you a warm welcome for the third webinar in this PARTHENOS webinar series under the title of eHumanities and eHeritage Research Infrastructures Beyond Tools. And my guests today are Stefan Krauwer and Stefan Schmunk. You can see them already on the screen next to the right. Before we start, I will shortly explain some housekeeping rules to you, and especially how everything works. As you have noted, as a participant, you are muted during the webinar, and you also cannot be seen, only what you submit to the chat. If you have any questions or remarks, you are warmly invited to use the chat to put communication to all participants. And if you have a very special question for the question and answer session at the end, it would be very nice if you indicate it by starting with a question word before. We have a lot of time, or we have time after the presentation to answer your questions. If you have any sound problems, please test your technical settings, and you should be able to, you have the speaker symbol has to be green, that you can hear something. That's all for the housekeeping. And now I first would like to say a few words about PARTHENOS, the PARTHENOS project who is hosting the webinar series. PARTHENOS stands for Pooling Activities, Resources and Tools for Heritage, E-Research, Networking, Optimization and Synergies. Mainly what is behind this very long title is that PARTHENOS is a Horizon 2020 project that aims to strengthen the cohesion between heritage-related e-research, and it does so by having many international partners from various European countries. PARTHENOS is coordinated by PIN in Italy, and I have said that before, but I mention it again, this webinar series is a cross-PARTHENOS training effort. Now you have already heard a bit about PARTHENOS. My name is Ulrike Wuttke, and now I would really like to know a bit more about you, the participants who are already, I see you. I have prepared a little short answer poll for you, just to get to know each other a little bit. Where do you come from? So it would be great if you could type a short answer in the poll, so we can have a little idea about the geographical spread. Okay. Many answers already coming in. Okay, thank you. And we see Germany is quite many people from Germany, but I also see Croatia and Ireland, and you see what I see: Sweden, the Netherlands, Spain, Budapest, Greece, so Croatia. So wow, that's amazing. Thank you for making the time and be here with us today. Okay. And then I come to the most important people for today, besides all the participants. But I'm very happy that Stefan Krauwer and Stefan Schmunk are here today as trainers of this webinar. Both are experts in the field of research infrastructures. And just a few words about each one of them. Stefan is originally has a degree in mathematics. You wouldn't think that maybe, and also a minor in linguistics. And he has spent very productively most of the time at his time at the Faculty of Humanities of Utrecht. He was the coordinator of CLARIN EU and even has been part of the founding period. And he is now acting as a senior advisor to the CLARIN ERIC board. So welcome, Stefan. Stefan Schmunk holds a degree in history and political science, and he has a PhD in contemporary history. And he has been the coordinator of Daria.de, Daria Germany. And since 2015, he is the deputy head of the research and development department of Göttingen State and University Library. So welcome also to Stefan. And that is from me. I gladly hand over to the two of you.
Okay, welcome. My name is Stefan Krauwer. Since you're all based in Europe, I can really say welcome to you, and I will not be the first speaker in this seminar. It will be my first webinar ever, so it's a very exciting experience for me as well. But I will now hand over to my colleague Stefan to start the introduction of our webinar. Thank you.
Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Stefan Schmunk. Yeah, it's also my first webinar, and Stephen and I are really, we're looking forward for today. It's a little bit creepy because we can't see anybody, but anyhow, if you have any questions, use the chat, please. We want to give you today a short introduction into the topic of research infrastructures in the European landscapes beyond tools. That means today we are not talking about tools, but if you have any questions, just ask. Okay. We want to start with a really short prologue because, in our opinion, research and science, not only in the arts and humanities and the cultural heritage, but mostly in general, changed in many ways in the last 3 decades. And I like really much the overview by Jim Gray. Jim Gray is the eScience group leader of Microsoft, and a couple of years ago, around 2010, he set up an overview about the last 3,000 years of science, history of science in one slide. And in our opinion, we are at the moment in many ways in the middle of digital transformation of the arts and humanities. And at the same time, we had a lot of changes during the past 1,000 years in science. And especially after the time of enlightenment in the 17th century, science changed in many ways. Before, the most scientists and scholars described natural phenomena. And after the period of the 17th century, 18th century, they thought more about theories and models and tried to generalize the view of the world. And at the middle of the 20th century, the era of computers started. And so we had a lot of topics about computerization and simulation of complex phenomena. During the last 20 years, 30 years, and my background, I'm a librarian, we had a lot of changes in science and also a lot of changes in the arts and humanities because science moved really strong and fast to a data-driven science. And we want to give you today an overview about it. And at the same time, the digital transformations of the last 3 decades changed in many ways research in the arts and humanities. New digital research methods were developed. We are talking not only about literature, books, or printed sources. We're talking more and more about digital data, and we're talking about larger volumes of digital data, which are the basis for the arts and humanities. And at the same time, we have some changes and major changes in the education and trainings. Scholars in the arts and humanities need new abilities. And we had a lot of changes of curricula and staffing at the universities during the last 10 years. And looking at Germany, it started around 2007, 2008, that it was suddenly possible to get a degree in digital humanities, for example, or in digital library. But we are at the beginning of this movement. At the same time, we have a change of theoretical approaches. It's something completely different if you are talking about digital data and the context of digital data compared to a printed book. And the research practices changed in many ways. In the opinion of Stephen and me, the digital turn in the arts and humanities is like a wave. And a lot of people are scared about the changes and challenges. But for us, it's more or less an opportunity. And we are the opinions that arts and humanities should ride the wave. And you will see the image today more often. Okay, what we are planning to do today with you is we want to investigate how research infrastructures can assist the research process in the social science, arts, humanities, and cultural heritage. That will be our first topic. At the same time, which opportunities and challenges, I talked about the digital transformations. That means we have at the same time opportunities and challenges for the way how we do research. And the third aspect, how stakeholders, how scholars can engage with digital research infrastructures. We want to give you a brief overview about some initiatives on the European level and at the same time on the national levels. And yeah, we are looking forward to the discussions. And
okay, thank you, Stefan. Well, since we're all researchers, we will of course start with the question, what are research infrastructures? Because before we can discuss them, we have to have an idea what they are. And well, we start with a rather formal definition by the European Commission in some document that they wrote about research infrastructures. I'm not suggesting that research infrastructures have been invented by the European Commission. On the contrary, they existed long before the European Commission had been invented. But in their definition, they say that research infrastructures are facilities, resources, and services used by the science community to conduct research and foster innovation. And they include major scientific equipment, resources such as collections, archives, and scientific data, e-infrastructures such as data and computing systems, and communication networks. Research infrastructures can be single-sited, just one single resource at a single location, distributed, a network of distributed resources, and they can also be virtual. And this means that the service is provided electronically, and there will not be one big building that hosts the whole facility. Very often it's just a collection of computers or data storage places spread over Europe. And now, if we look at the infrastructures, we all know that infrastructures can exist in many different shapes. You have analog infrastructures such as libraries, galleries, archives, and museums, but there are also data infrastructures where that give access to all sorts of data for different disciplines, and they are the digital and the let's say the analog infrastructure are interestingly different in one specific way. If you have a physical infrastructure, analog one, a big building, they normally have a starting point when they start building the infrastructure, and they have a point where the infrastructure is ready to be used by the researcher, and very often some 5, 10 or 100 years later, there's a moment when the thing is closed down. For digital infrastructures, the situation is different. And in that they normally gradually evolve. They start with a small collection of data, and they gradually expand. More and more data are added, more and more tools and facilities are added. So these things don't have a very clear starting point, but they are in a continuous state of evolution. And now we are actually very proud to say that research infrastructure started in the humanities. So it started with us. And I think that libraries are the oldest research infrastructures in the world. And some examples that I found on Wikipedia is the Royal Library of Alexandria. That's some 2,500 years ago. Another one in Mosul, the National Library of France in Paris, and the University of Oxford's library since 1602. So they have been in existence for a long, long time. So they are nothing new. And what we see, but most of these libraries were for, let's say, for the soft sciences, for the humanities, for literary studies, for theologists or whatever. And what you see now is that in recent times we have started to develop research infrastructures for the hard sciences. So we have particle accelerators. CERN in Geneva is, of course, the most known example. There are new ocean research vessels, the Polarstern since 1982, although even ships like James Cook's Endeavour that they used to discover Australia could be called research infrastructure, because the purpose of that travel was to investigate the world. And of course we also have the Hubble Space Telescope that has a place somewhere in space already since 1990. So there are lots of different types of infrastructures. And in the 1990s, you see new trends. Apart from the physical installations, we get domain-independent computing infrastructures. A very well-known example is the academic networks throughout Europe that connect us all. And EduRoam is a very interesting feature of it that allows us to connect to this network wherever we are in Europe, and even outside Europe in some places. And we have developed domain-specific data infrastructures that collect data and provide data in all disciplines, such as environmental and earth sciences, biological medical sciences, energy, material sciences, analytical facilities, physical sciences, mathematics and ICT, and last but not least, social sciences and humanities. And now, what about you? Before we start discussing or explaining more about the infrastructures. The question is, and you will see a poll on your screen very soon, what exactly is, how would you describe your role in relation to research infrastructures? And we've given a few examples of roles, and you can just select one or more of them. You could be, let's say, a student or a researcher who's really using the infrastructure as a consumer, but some of you may be providing data or services or tools to the infrastructure. Some of you may be building and operating infrastructures. Some of you are managers of infrastructures. And of course, there are always other people who are not closely related to infrastructure at all, but who are still interested in this webinar. So now if I look at the scores, I'm pleasantly surprised to see that seems to be a majority of real users of infrastructures. Because one of our concerns as, let's say, research infrastructure owners or operators is that although it's fun making infrastructures and making the tools, it's always the question how many users we attract that really want to use our infrastructure. Because I think it's only if the users use the infrastructure that it makes sense to spend our time and spend taxpayers' money on building and exploiting the infrastructures. So I'm really very, very pleasantly surprised. So now that we know who we are, I think we can close the poll for now. And I would like to hand over to Stefan, who is going to tell us what we in social science, humanities and cultural heritage expect from research infrastructures.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you all, because we talked in the phase of preparation for the webinar during the last weeks a lot about the audience of research infrastructures, and Stephen and I had the impression during the last years that often the real users of the infrastructures are not the main group of active partners, because you see on the slide we prepared here, it's a definition from the Wissenschaftsrat in Germany from the year 2011. It's a high political organization, and they gave a definition about research infrastructures in the social sciences and humanities and cultural heritage. And at the same point, it was the starting point in Germany to discuss how research infrastructures for the arts and humanities should be built. And they give two aspects and 2 points why it's needed. And first, they say, okay, research infrastructures can improve the working conditions, e.g. in terms of access to scientific information, so data or publications. And second, the discussion and development of research infrastructures are important to handle in new ways concrete research projects, and to develop new tools and software products to analyze data. And so you see maybe the interests and the main focus of the normal audience and the user could be a little bit different. Let me jump on the European level. As I said, in Germany, it started around 2009, 2010. Definition came from 2011. On the European level, the discussion about research infrastructure started around 2002. And the European Commission founded ESRI, European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructures. And they decided that research infrastructures, not only for the arts and humanities, for the whole disciplinary bandwidth in the European research area, would be important to be developed. And at the moment, we have around 50 European research infrastructures in the whole broad variety of disciplines, coming from energy, environment, health, food, physical science, engineering, social and cultural innovation. And Stephen has shown you 3 of them, like CERN or like the Polarstern. And you can find some additional and further information on the website of the European Union. By the way, we put all the links in the presentation, so you can use it after the webinar to get more and further information. The really important aspect at this point is, when we are talking about research infrastructures on a European level, it's always a consortium of national partners. So you have not only one host in one country, it's always a network of scholars and scientists across over Europe who are participating on this research infrastructure. Coming back to the arts and humanities and cultural heritage, at the moment we have 6 research infrastructures. So let me start with Chester, then CLARIN and DARIA. CLARIN and DARIA will be presented later on. A new one is eHeritage, European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, and for social science, European Social Survey and SHARE. Additionally to these 6 research infrastructures, we have a bundle of European research projects. And the 6 we mention here on this slide are only an example for a really broad variety of different research projects on the European level. eHeritage is, for example, research infrastructure for European for Holocaust studies, and a lot of local and national institutions and scholars and scientists are working collaboratively on the question how data and sources from the area of the National Socialism could be made accessible for the research. And yeah, if you want to know more, you can click later on the links. And our question is always, and it's an elementary aspect for the developing process of research infrastructures, how research infrastructures can assist the research process. And so I will hand over to Stephen at this point.
Okay, thank you. Because I think many people may think that research infrastructure of the types we are discussing, the ones with filled with data, can only assist the research process by offering files of data and a bag of tools to process the data. But there's a lot more that research infrastructures have to offer to the research community, and we are going to illustrate this on the basis of a few examples. Before we can do this, we have to realize that the research process is the process that consists of stages, different stages, and that in each of them you will see that the research infrastructure can play a different role, can provide different support to the researchers. And to distinguish the phases of the research process, we will adopt the research life cycle that has been adopted by the PARTHENOS project. But there are lots of other, let's say, competing models of the research process, but this one was very convenient for us because of its simplicity. I would like to emphasize that when we are using the term research process all the time, we interpret it in a very, very broad sense, because we know that the research infrastructure are not just serving those who are doing research and who want to make an academic career and write lots and lots of books and articles and papers and become famous. Our users are also people working in cultural heritage institutions where their main objective, that's what they are being paid for, is not to write academic papers, but to improve the quality of a collection and the way it's documented, preserved and presented, etc., etc. So we very explicitly include this category of users, even if we keep saying researchers for the sake of simplicity. Now, as I said, I mean, we're going to show the PARTHENOS model. If you do a search on Google for research life cycle, you will see a variety of different pictures, you know, very, very big ones and very nice and elegant ones. And but we've, as I said, we've adopted the one that PARTHENOS is using because it's a fairly simple model that can help us to illustrate the usefulness of research infrastructures at various stages. Now, the model is this one. You see, it starts at developing the research question, then planning the research project, carrying out research, analyzing data, and then publishing the results. And of course, there is, we put it in the middle, also the issue of training, because for many of the activities you need some training and support in order to be able to perform them properly. I think in the ideal picture, I would have liked to see an arrow coming in from the left and just touching the circle at the point where developing the research question starts, because that would be the phase where students are trained in order to become researchers. So first you get your training, then when you've got your degree or your diploma, whatever, you start developing research questions. So then you end up in this carousel, and there you will probably spend the rest of your career turning in circles that are getting more and more exciting. Everything you start on a new question. Now, let's see. We are going to illustrate this on the basis of two research infrastructures, as Stefan already mentioned, CLARIN and Daria. You will see that they are, although they are both research infrastructure for the social sciences and humanities and cultural heritage, they operate in very different way and they have a very different focus. I'll now hand over to Stefan, who will tell us everything about Daria.
Not everything, only a few aspects of Daria and CLARIN. As you know, we are coming both from the Daria or CLARIN perspective, so it was really close to us that we use both initiatives as examples for today. And you find further information on Daria EU, but the most important aspect is that we are not only talking about technical components of an infrastructure, because in our understanding, an infrastructure is always set up with the minimum of 4 components. And we are talking about teaching, training, classes, courses. We are talking about research data. I think research data is always an important aspect because we have a difference compared to printed sources or books if you're using digital or digitized data, because you need a broader methodological background to analyze and to make it usable. And so Daria, for example, is collecting best practices for metadata and standardized exchange of data, is developing ontologies. And one elementary question, not only for the art and humanities, is always how you can find your data. And so the question of make data citable, referable, and findable is a really important aspect. So teaching research data are 2 components. Research is, in our opinion, the most important aspect of research infrastructures, because we are not building a bridge or a highway, and we are in the middle of a research process if we're talking about digital research infrastructures, because we don't know at the moment how a research infrastructure could run for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And our goal is to make data accessible, to make data citable. And so we are in the middle of a research field, and this research field has to be organized collaboratively and interdisciplinary. And last but not least, the 4th task of activity in the Daria context is the area of technical infrastructures, because you need a technical background to develop tools or to make data citable and so on. But anyhow, Daria is by researchers for researchers, and it's an architecture of participation. That means that everybody could participate on this network, and everybody is able to integrate their own research results and their own ideas and developments into this network. Coming back to the research circle, we have different phases, and I just want to give you a brief overview so that you can find a lot of information about this single step, starting, for example, with Daria Teach. It's collections of courses and online material, going over to digital humanities bibliography, which is hosted by Daria in Germany, but at the same time more than 150 scholars worldwide are working on, and so on and so on. And on the left side you see 2 examples for repository and publishing results. One is a HAL archive. It's a French repository which is used in the Arts and Humanities European-wide, and the other one is a new kind of publishing research results with the name of Daria Working Papers. It's a service from Daria in Germany. and I will hand over again to.
Thank you, Stefan. I will very briefly give some highlights of the CLARIN infrastructure. CLARIN stands for Common Language Resources and Technology Infrastructure, also serving specifically the humanities, social sciences, humanities and cultural heritage community, but also others. CLARIN is about language. And language in all its modalities, just not just written text, but also ancient inscriptions, manuscripts, modern text, movies, audio, video recordings, people who use sign language and web content, or whatever has an element of language is interesting and relevant for us. Contrary to Daria, which Stefan described as a sort of community of researchers, we see ourselves in CLARIN as a community of repositories, data and tools repositories in, at this moment, 22 countries, and they have as their common goal to make digital language resources and tools and expertise available to scholars, researchers and students, or whoever wants to study something where language plays a role. And now, some of you might think, well, this is going to be about linguistics, and I'm not a linguist, so I'll just get up and have a cup of coffee. But you should realize that language is everywhere. Language plays many different roles for many different disciplines. I just mentioned a few here on this slide. You know, it's I'm not going to describe them all in detail, but you see it touches upon cultural heritage, upon history, sociology, anthropology, all disciplines when it comes down to preserving, disseminating knowledge. Law, theology, media studies, journalism, education, literary studies, psychology, brain studies, political sciences, language and speech technology, and also linguistics and phonetics, of course. So you see many different communities make use of language in their daily research practice, and I think that most of them could make use of the services offered by CLARIN. Now, if we go through the research life cycle, then we take some of the phases, the initial training phase, where you, let's say, educated as a student. What does CLARIN offer there? Well, we have a course registry where you can find education opportunities. This is something we do together with Daria. And we have, we give video lectures. I'm sure that this lecture will be published on the CLARIN website as well, as soon as it's finalized. We have summer school sessions, workshops, tutorials. And we offer mobility grants to bring researchers and technical experts together. If you look at the phase where you develop research questions and plan your research, what we do is we offer a huge catalog of, at this moment, 1.6 million language resources that people can browse in order to check whether the resources they need are available somewhere within or outside CLARIN. We have a CLARIN portal that offers showcases of, let's say, or use cases where people can show, where we show how digital methods are used in specific disciplines to serve a sort of source of inspiration for researchers who want to formulate the research questions. We have some very interesting collections of families of key resources that are relevant for many different disciplines, like historical newspapers, parliamentary records, oral history recordings, and social media. And we also provide best practice document on a variety of topics, including standards, usage use, and all the problems and possible solutions with respect to IPR issues. Then if you move on in the research life cycle, it's once you start carrying out your research, we offer very easy access to both open and protected language data in all modalities. We have all sorts of web applications and tools that you can use to analyze your data, to visualize your data. And we have various search opportunities so that you can search across repositories all over Europe for specific items that you want to find. And we have thematic knowledge centers dedicated to specific languages or specific technologies or data types, where people can just get advice and support for their work. And then once you want to publish your results, especially data resulting from your project, we offer depositing services and persistent identifiers to make sure that even after 100 years, you can still find the data that you've been referring to in your publications. Then this was CLARIN, and I want to emphasize that there is also a whole collection of invisible research infrastructures. I mentioned them already briefly earlier on, that really are the enablers for all our work, and that this is typically the academic networks, and because what they do is they offer the opportunity to researchers to communicate with each other. They allow us to connect to the infrastructures, they interconnect nodes of data networks. They help us to connect infrastructure across disciplines, which I think is very important, and they offer platforms for electronic publication of results and for training and education activities. And they are really crucial. If they didn't exist, we could not exist either. And with these words, I hand over to,
Yeah. Okay, I will take over.
Yep.
Okay, and let us come to the last steps of our webinar. Ulrike, our host for today, gave me the signals that we have to hurry up a little bit. But anyhow, we want to give you some takeaway messages with you. And as we mentioned at the beginning, we see a lot of opportunities and challenges for research infrastructures, and we want to break it down to 3 action lines. First, work on the development and implementation of courses aimed at digital literacy in SSH and CH curricula. That means that we have to think a lot more in the next years how we can integrate digital efforts in the curricula at the level of universities, for example. At the same time, we have to involve courses and classes for those already working as researchers or educators, because they has to be trained also. And the third aspect, and that's the main aspect for Stephen and me, we need to offer facilities, and we need to offer some technical back-end and backgrounds for researchers and technical experts to team up and to work together on using digital data and tools and to address research questions, because research questions changed during the last years a little bit and will change in a stronger way during the next years, because scholars in the arts and humanities and the cultural heritage will have new opportunities to handle data and larger data sets. And we want to know from you, and it will be for us maybe introduction for our discussion later on. What do you think are the opportunities and challenges of research infrastructures? If you like, just type it to the chat. Ulrike will collect it, and so we can start to the discussion later on. But first, 2 final slides about take-home messages. First, as Stephen said, DARIA and CLARIN are not the only research infrastructures on the European level. We presented you some others, and a lot of research infrastructures exist on national level. So they are really doing a great job, and that's the second aspect. Maybe sometimes a lot of people think, okay, they have a lot of overlaps and their activities are complementary to each other. Yes, and that's good, because it's a research topic for all of us, because we need to do research how research infrastructures and technical components can work in the futures. And we need a cross-discipline perspective to it. That's the second take-home message. The third one, our eyes are a joint venture of scholars, computer scientists, information experts, and representatives of galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. Research infrastructures has always an interdisciplinary aspect and needed to run for the efforts of the arts and humanities. Fourth, there exists no question, either or. Research infrastructure supports researchers who work and research digitally, and that's fine. And it's not better or worse if you are not working on a digital level. It's also fine, because we are all doing research, and it does not matter how we are doing it. Fifth, and I mentioned it earlier, research infrastructures are tools for research projects, and at the same time, they are subject of research. So we are in the middle of a process. Nobody will get a finally working research infrastructure like a Microsoft software product, and it will run the next 20 years, and we don't have to think about how it will do. It is research. It's new. It's innovative. And we thought the last days a lot about a slogan for research infrastructures. And Stephen and I just found 2 days ago the slogan of the MIT. And in our opinion, generating, spreading, preserving knowledge and collaborating with each other. That is the main goal of research infrastructures in the social sciences and humanities. So thank you very much. And we are looking forward to the discussion. So please type a lot of questions. Thank you. And I will hand over to Ulrike again.
Yeah, thank you so much for this very inspiring presentation. I think there is a lot to think about, and the chat is getting very active at the moment. So I think the questions are just rolling in. And to answer one question already, we will make the presentation available later on. So no fear about that. I will collect them from the speakers, and we will upload them to SlideShare and also to Hull. So you also have the slides as a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, so let's see for a question. See something. I will put it also for you to see, and just make it a bit bigger. I will move it into the screen in a second, but just that you can read it. So here it comes. Yeah, you should be able to see it. So there came in something from Jeff. So I think I hand over to Stefan and Stephen, and I will.
Okay, Stephen, maybe I will start because Daria has mentioned, but it's also a question for every research infrastructures. Yes, I think Jeff, you're totally right. It's hard work, and so we started with Daria around 10 years ago. It was a pre-project around 2008. And officially, we started 2011. It's hard work to engage scholars and researchers, and that is one reason why Stephen and I put training in the middle of the research circle, because training, giving classes, establishing a contact point for questions is really important. And in our experience, it's always a hard work to engage it, because every single scholar has a different question and has a totally different intention why he or she is interested to work more digital. And it's a really important investment to set up training, set up classes, set up summer schools, and at the same time go to the different disciplinary approaches. Because in Germany, for example, we had around 15 years ago the DQuit initiative, and the DQuit initiative was especially computing center, library, and computer science driven effort. And the issue was always that a lot of infrastructures were built up, and after a while, everybody recognized, okay, nobody will use it or is using it. And the only initiative which really focused from the beginning on was TextGrid. And the only chance, and that is a result why TextGrid is still running today, was a really close engagement with the scholars.
Okay, Stefan, are you done? Or because okay,
sorry.
I couldn't see it, but no, thank you, Jeff, for this question. I think it's a very interesting question, and I totally agree with you. But I have a question to you, because in my experience, when we started CLARIN, it was relatively easy for us to find users from the linguistics community, because many of the people who started CLARIN were actually linguists or computational linguists. And so, to my perception, you find linguists at every street corner. So it's very easy to reach them in order to show them the benefits they could have from using CLARIN. But as soon as you go to other disciplines where language is interesting, for example, libraries, they're all built on language, I would say, then it's very much harder to reach them. But do you have suggestions for things we could do in order to, for example, reach out in a more effective way to libraries, in order to first of all, make people working there aware of what exists, and also in order to establish more collaboration than we already have? I don't know, Jeff, whether you have a chance to type in. You know, if you don't have any immediate ideas of things we could do, you can always send us an email with suggestions, because I think, let's say, opening up towards the libraries is something that I would very much like to do in a systematic way, and we have connection with some university libraries, especially, but I think that in many respects, CLARIN and Daria and libraries have many things in common, and they should be able to find each other in order to collaborate and in order to let each other benefit from what we all have to offer. Now, I see Daniela's question. Yes. Creative quality, yeah, absolutely. In access to research infrastructure, that's very important. And I think, in a sense, we as digital infrastructures have an advantage in that very often capacity or reachability is not a problem. Whereas if you are owner of a physical infrastructure, then all these physical infrastructure have a limited capacity, and very often people have to compete in order to get beam time on the particle accelerators or whatever. And very often the research infrastructure is not in your own country, so you have to travel and spend maybe a couple of months in another place, and that is costly. But in our case, I think people can just access the CLARIN and Daria infrastructures online and try to find all the information they need. So that's good, but I still think that we should do more, as I call it, missionary work in order to reach out to people, to explain to them what we can offer. And well, I see the challenge to maintain long-term accessibility. Yeah, that's absolutely true, because the long-term accessibility is always a challenge, because if you look at the funding bodies who fund research infrastructures, they are national governments, and well, they very rarely want to commit themselves for indefinite periods of time. They will just say, well, we're going to fund you for 5 years, and then after 5 years you can come back, and then either you get something or you don't get anything. I mean, that's sort of lottery. But we hope that also the funding authorities realize that sustainability of research infrastructure is really crucial in order to get a return on the investments they make on setting up and maintaining the infrastructures.
And maybe let me add one aspect. Research in the arts and humanities does not know any borders. And so, for example, in the DARIA context, we have a lot of research groups worldwide working. So maybe some hosts in Europe, some hosts in the United States or in Northern America. And that's an opportunity of digital research infrastructures, because it is not important anymore where or when you are working on a topic. Just the opportunity exists to do so. And it's always funny, because when we're talking about researchers, we are not only talking about the level of universities or academics on this level. We have a lot of people who have totally other jobs, on which are interested in doing research in the arts and humanities, in kind of public science. And they can use this kind of research infrastructures too. And so that's an opportunity. And coming back to Jeff, yes, I think it's a really important challenge. And in my opinion, it's really important to bring libraries, archive, universities, research institutions to one table, because building up and running an infrastructure is a topic for all of them. That's, by the way, one reason why the consortium in Germany has all the different types of institutions in it, because you need, if you want, or you need partners like libraries if you're talking about long-term sustainability of data. They can do it because they have done it the last hundreds of years, yeah. And it's the same for archives. And it's an approach of all the institutions on an academic level. And so we have to talk and integrate libraries, archives, universities, research infrastructures, and by the way, also social communities like the Open Knowledge Foundation or like Wikipedia, because they have new ways of dealing data. Roger and out.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting discussion. And we're almost at the end. I actually have a question. I'm not sure if you can answer it, but looking at this very nice sign language GIF, I started wondering what the hand is saying, if it was CLARIN or Hello World or something like that. But
no, I wish I knew, but yeah, I don't. But next time I will use one where I know what the meaning is. And I'm sure that the problem with sign language is that sign language is not opposed to what many people think international. Every language has its own sign language. So even if some expression makes sense in Dutch, it may not make sense in English or German or French or whatever. Or it could mean something totally different, or even the opposite. We don't know.
Yeah, and the funny aspect, you have some accents at the same time. Yeah, and so not only on national level. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, then we come to the closing words. I'm sorry for that, but we want to keep it to 1 hour. I will write a wrap up with Stefan and Steven, so where we take up the question from the chat, we write a short summary. You will get the presentation, so you can look at the slides and follow all the interesting links. And we will also put online the webinar recording, but bear with us. It might take some time, but I will be working on this and be as fast as possible. Now, what you can do for us is, first of all, fill in the feedback survey, give us an impression how you like the webinar. We have more coming up in April about developing research questions and about analyzing data. So follow also our social media activities to learn when they will happen. And the last but not least for me is to thank Stefan and Steven for doing a great job and giving so much information and lots to think about, and especially tackling the big question of how to engage with users and how to engage between the different research infrastructures, analog and digital, in the social sciences and humanities. The last word is to the two of you.
Well, thank you, Ulrike, for organizing this. I really enjoyed this webinar. As I told you earlier on, this is my very first one, and I'm looking forward to the next one. And I also would like to emphasize that if you would like to, if you have some additional questions and would like to contact us, you know where to find us, you know, and then we will be happy to answer your questions, even if questions come up later on. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening, and don't hesitate if you have any further question, just contact us. And by the way, I really like Otto, the open access otter. It's a fascinating and I think one last word, not only research infrastructures but also digital humanities are always a jointly collaboration of scholars, librarians, archivists, and we can ride the wave because it is part of our job. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and goodbye to all the participants. We hope to see you back for the 4th edition.
Stephen, I think we have to leave too, or I don't know. No.